Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Consol, your host. Two quick things before introducing you to my guest. First, I encourage you to subscribe to this podcast by clicking on the follow button and also clicking on the bell icon so you're alerted to each new edition of the program. Second, in addition to being the producer of this podcast and interviewing novelists, I am a novelist myself. I've written 4 books, 3 novels, and 1 short story collection. In the episode notes, you will find a short link to my Amazon page and all 4 of those titles. Now, on with our program. In the spotlight is Graham Greene, the great British novelist, as remembered by fellow novelist Thomas Waugh. Thomas Waugh joins us from London. Thomas, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on here talking about Graham Greene, a fine novelist that I hope gets plenty of traction in the US and worldwide still.
Yes, absolutely. I've read several of his novels just recently. Let me, first of all, I normally will introduce our guest, but why don't I'll do it a little differently this time, Thomas, and just have you go ahead and introduce yourself in terms of what you do as a novelist. Give us kind of the nutshell wrap.
Well, I mean, as a novelist, I have 2 kind of strands to what I do. I have kind of Lee Child, Jack Reacher type thrillers, but I also write spy thrillers, which are more in the mold of kind of Graham Greene entertainments. So there are kind of 2 strands to what I do. But, you know, I'm conscious and mindful when writing these books that I've got Graham Greene and John le Carre on my shoulder. I wouldn't blame them for any faults of mine, though.
Very well. So Graham Greene runs. I mean, the work that he did, of course, is stuff that I'm sure was influential to you, or the kind of things that inspired your own work. Correct?
Without a doubt. I mean, especially for the spy thrillers, obviously. I first encountered Graham Greene, it would have been a couple of decades ago now, I think, where in a former life, I used to be a publicist. And I worked with an author called Tim Butcher, who was the best-selling author of Blood River. But I also worked with him on a book called Chasing the Devil, which was basically a travel book about him following in the footsteps of Graham Greene and his book Journey Without Maps when he traveled around Africa with his far braver and more accomplished cousin Barbara Greene. So that was my first encounter with Graham Greene. And then I subsequently kind of saw the film, funnily enough, The End of the Affair, and read that book. But
that's my favorite. That is my favorite novel.
Well, it's a perfect novel.
Graham
I mean, there's
Greene.
not a paragraph wasted, and it is a fine book. I mean, it's a kind of book that other writers wish they could write.
Mm-hmm.
But then fast forward, probably about 10 years, and I read a book called Gun for Sal. Which is a kind of entertainment of Graham Greene about a hitman. And this kind of sparked an idea of mine to write a kind of modern Graham Greene thriller with a modern hitman that kind of folded in some of Greene's, in the kind of characters. They're isolated, they're depressed, they're kind of ill at ease and ill at odds with the world. And in some ways, they are kind of violent and villainous, but then there's kind of a redeeming qualities to them also. So that was kind of my initial inspiration. And then I wrote, a series of novellas, and I called that Gun for Hire out of a nod towards kind of that book and Graham Greene. And that's
so you've met Graham. You met Graham Greene the man while he was still.
No.
Oh,
God,
okay.
No.
Okay.
No, I wasn't.
But you came across his work and so
yeah,
on.
I came across his work. I mean, the thing is, I mean, as you said, the books are the things. If at the end of this podcast, if we can convince a few people to read or reread Graham Greene, we've had a worthwhile afternoon.
Well, one of the things I did recently was read Graham Greene's biography, one of the biographies about Graham Greene, and
by
I didn't.
Richard Greene.
Yeah, I believe so. I'd have to go back and
Yeah.
look, but I think that's right. No
No
relation,
relation, of
right?
course, but I
Yes.
had a little dealings with Richard Greene, who is a lovely man and wrote a brilliant bio. I mean, Greene led a very rich, pacey life, and this biography captures all of that. And at the heart of the things, again, are the novels where he discusses all of those. But he's brilliant on kind of Greene, the writer. How much he got paid. It's not a hagiography either. I mean, Green can be a, difficult character and even cruel sometimes. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that surprised me was how much Graham Greene suffered from depression, and
Mm.
like so many writers, it shouldn't be a surprise because so many writers suffer from depression, it seems like, and how political he was in terms of direct involvement in fighting against fascism, communism, American imperialism, and interventionism, and oppression of all sorts. And
I
it
mean,
almost,
partly he was an excellent journalist, and because of his fame and the fact that he could go to these trouble spots with more connections than most people, he did shine a light on the likes of Haiti and Cuba. And problems there, where he did kind of popularize these places and hotspots where they probably weren't being covered years ago as much.
Our Man in Havana, one of his
Yeah,
novels.
exactly. Uh,
Uh,
I
but
mean,
it seemed to me that he was putting himself at risk a lot of the time, almost not caring because he was so depressed and maybe suicidal that so
there
what if
there
I
is an
end up
argument. I
dead?
think he had a fight against boredom that these kind of trips and causes helped with. I mean, his liver was more in danger than the rest of his body, though. I suspect in most of these instances, I mean, he would have been sort of known the right people. He wasn't that reckless, it seems. I've met a lot of foreign
What was
correspondents,
his
and
drink? What was his drink before you talk about
I think
his
whatever was available, I suspect. I mean, he always kind of tried the local delicacies, and obviously in the Far East, he tried opium. I mean, he kind of used speed as well, Benzodrine to help, right? But I think it was just kind of constant. I imagine he would have drunk barrels of gin over the course of his life, where that was in quickies, and I think he said whiskey is the medicine of despair. So
Oh, there you
he would
go.
have had lots of whiskey, but I suspect he drank what came to hand.
Now you were
Like
saying that
all
he
good
probably wasn't
Englishmen.
as reckless as
Yeah,
it seemed, that when he would go to these regions, he would take measures to help protect himself.
yeah,
But clearly he was
they
putting
all.
himself at risk to some
Oh
degree.
yeah, I mean he made some enemies, of course. I mean Papa Doc of Haiti kind of uh, kind of highlighted him as a kind of enemy of the people, which actually Green embraced really because it meant that his kind of criticisms were on the spot. I mean, Green also put himself in danger in terms of litigation as well. That was where he kind of shot his mouth off rather than shot a gun.
Yeah.
And there were a few court cases. And I think that was more foolhardy than courage, of course.
No, he actually worked then with MI6. Was he working as an outsider with MI6 or was he an actual
Well,
employee of
I mean,
MI6 at some
in
point?
terms of Green's biography, the one thing it doesn't really cover so much, and this is partly because Green didn't really talk about it himself, was his work for MI6. There is a new book out by a chap called Robert Vercape, I believe, which is called The Writer and the Traitor. And this is a kind of dual biography of Green and Kin Philby, who really was a nasty piece of work. And it goes into a lot more detail about actually what Green did for MI6, where it wasn't that glamorous, but he really did work in intelligence on a day-to-day basis, and he worked under Philby as well. Obviously, he had his kind of posting in Africa, which led to the heart of the matter, which is again a fine book. And then he worked back in London as well. He didn't always get on with his superiors in MI6, although he did get on with the Kim Philby, but he did kind of quit at the end of the war. His kind of work was done, but he
Mhm.
did do a bit in the intelligence services. Yeah, he just was kind of faithful to the the Official Secrets Act or the equivalent then, that he wouldn't talk about it, and he never really boasted about it either. That he was quite modest on that front.
Green was Graham Greene was described himself supposedly as both a Catholic and a skeptic. Do you know anything about that? That's really all I know, and I'm wondering, do you have any
Well,
insight
it's
as to
difficult
what's
to
the
pin him
skeptical
down. I mean,
part?
Green, for all of that he wrote about himself, a little bit like Bob Dylan today, we still don't really know exactly what he thought about certain things. The books give a great guide, but these are characters who are full of, ambiguity and philosophical nuance as well. So Green used to almost throw red herrings out there as well about what he really thought. So the question, how much of a Catholic was he, is interesting, where obviously he was a convert, and that would theoretically, in some ways, can make you more zealous. But in terms of all the tenets of the Catholic Church, he certainly didn't agree with. I mean, he was a writer and a skeptic, which kind of tempered, I think, his Catholicism. Yet he was also kind of obsessed with it, where it was perhaps a cause and a cure for his depression, as you mentioned, which he kind of suffered from throughout of his life. I mean, in terms of the kind of book that I sort of wrote, really focus on Graham Greene, called Eastern Promises. It's the idea of Greene being both a kind of Catholic and then a communist as well, or certainly a communist sympathies. And that's where there is a kind of friction where Catholicism is probably more concerned with the individual, and then the kind of communist sympathies was about, more well, kind of socialism and practical kind of politics as well. And after seeing kind of communism or communist leaders kind of, a little bit more closely, he kind of rejected a lot of, communism and Stalinism, where, Catholicism has this ability to stick. And kind of he carried that through. It runs through him more like a stick of rock, I think.
Regarding his Catholicism, Catholicism forbids suicide. And
Yes.
Graham, I think, was depressed enough to be suicidal at times. And I
Mm.
wonder if that wasn't something that he had, it was his adopted religion, and he decided that, well, it's forbidden, so I can't do it, but I'll just carry on.
I think nowadays to write a book about Catholicism and suicide, people wouldn't really bat an eyelid. But when he covered it in the heart of the matter, it really was a kind of cause célèbre. I mean, this was a sort of best-selling novelist, almost sanctioning suicide. And sort of, and a Catholic as well. And it was kind of big news of the day, where, there's this idea of a kind of, a depressed person sanctioning suicide. And there was a kind of practical way that he kind of did that as well in terms of the character Scobie. So it is a big thing. I mean, there's lots of also just characters that die throughout kind of Graham Greene's novels, and there was the question: was there a kind of death wish? Certainly had a high sex drive, but did he have a bit of a death drive as well? The argument is that he did. And some of the characters obviously, commit suicide, but some of them sort of die. And it's the idea that you're kind of happy with them dying because they were suffering so much. So his kind of relationship with death, or his characters, is fascinating. I mean, the trouble with that is that there are no sequels if you kill off the characters. So,
This is true. Yeah,
if
have to
for
keep reinventing.
instance, well, this is it. But if a lot of the characters did survive, novelists like me in a few years' time, or longer, more than that, could write the sequels. But there a lot of characters die. Yeah, I hope I'm not. This is not spoiler alert, but people die. People,
Yes,
yeah,
yes. I think people would expect it. Yeah, some are going to make
yeah.
it, some are not. You
Mm.
mentioned you had hinted at a sex addiction. Was he promiscuous? Was he divorced
7 times like Richard
And
Burton.
again, this is where he could bend his Catholicism, where he married, and he married a Catholic, and he was married to her for a long time, but he was incredibly promiscuous. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not that shocking, really, that every generation thinks they invent sex and promiscuity, but it's been going around for a long time. And he had a number of long-term mistresses who, I mean, even the sort of character in the end of the affair, I mean, that was partly based upon a kind of relationship that he was having, and also in terms of, the man he courted was real, and also named, I think it's Henry, correct me if I'm wrong. So he did put that in his books as well. And obviously he was, not addicted to, but he had a penchant for prostitutes as well. I mean, it was the war. He was a journalist. These things add up.
Yeah. I like how you put that.
I mean, I got a feeling, I mean, I dare say it was pretty legion, but I mean, he sort of talked about it a little bit more openly as well, I think. And not to be sensationalist either. I just think there was a kind of honesty to him.
Yes. Now, he did divide his books into 2 categories, novels and entertainments. Does that mean anything to you? I mean,
it does,
how did he divide them?
I mean, yes is the answer when you read the books. I mean, there are some that, straddle both, literary fiction and also, thrillers. And these are some of his best work. I mean, Our Man in Havana works as an entertainment, and it works as a piece of literature, and the same with Quiet American as well. So it was a kind of shorthand for him, particularly, I think, in the earlier part of his career as well, though. And I mean, there are some great entertainments, if you like. It also helps because by learning his trade as a kind of spy and thriller writer, it gave a sense of extra engagement and thrills to his literary fiction. And this is probably why he sold so much. I mean, he was, in some ways, I guess it was, very commercial fiction, pot boilers almost.
What do you consider to be the major themes of his novels? What are kind of the overarching themes?
I think there's isolation and redemption. There is kind of this idea of looking for some sort of meaning and not necessarily finding it. I would say as well that you need to, in a sense, flag up the darker side of things to also kind of reveal the light as well. I mean, it sounds all a bit woolly, but these are some sort of general themes. I mean, I just think he had some incredibly interesting central characters as well, whether they were related to him or based upon him or not. They're just fundamentally interesting, flawed protagonists. Yeah, I mean... Yeah, sorry.
What about his prose style? I mean, how would you describe his style, his writing style, and did it evolve over time in your estimation?
I think it did. I mean, his early books are not that good. He started to find his voice, if you like, around kind of Stanball trained, obviously Brighton rock as well. I mean, he's mid to late period though. I mean, this is when all the sort of the big books come out, and they're not big in terms of length. So what he was very good at was reducing things down. I mean, in terms of, I kind of work in publishing, and it's less is more. Don't waste words. I mean, rather than pages and pages of description, he can basically set a scene in an almost cinematic way within a couple of paragraphs. These books. So then his books become naturally pacey as well, and rich. So I think that, and again, this is the idea of him being a thriller writer where things naturally have pace, even, the literary novels as well. I mean, he's excellent at kind of, setting in terms of his locations. So obviously it helped that he went there, but it's also just the skill of the writer where he conjures up, particularly things like, South America and Africa brilliantly. I was speaking to someone the other day, they read The Heart of the Matter, and he just kind of, Greene got it. He just that these books still resonate now. And in places, like Africa and South America, although these books were set, 50 years plus ago, or far more than that even, they do still resonate. There are echoes. He's very good at, picking what's interesting, I guess, selecting what's interesting.
Well, and when you talk about echoing today or resonating today, John le Carré and Ian McEwan have both been compared to Graham Greene, obviously influenced by Graham Greene. How big a footprint has his influence had? I mean, obviously, that's a pretty big footprint right there. Two really notable.
I think huge. You say,
authors.
William Boyd's kind of got an ongoing relationship with Graham Greene as well. Le Carré, funnily enough, so Graham Greene endorsed The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and it was a big thing to make the book a hit. Eventually le Carré had a bit of a falling out with Graham Greene over Kim Philby, funnily enough, but he rightly admired him as a writer. It's a bit, Greene is like Hemingway. I think there's these great touchstones where other writers and journalists want to be like them and write some of their books, partly because they did it. They went to these places and did the hard yards and lived the life of their characters, where that's very difficult now. I mean, John le Carré obviously was a spy briefly, and he had the resources and contacts to kind of go to these places as well. But there's something, I think, grittier about what Greene and Hemingway were doing, and they are kind of admired for that. I mean, I must have I kind of, it's just the sheer power and even beauty of the books. Graham Greene could string a sentence together like few others, particularly in his dialogue as well, and creating a sense of time and place. We all kind of we aspire to it, basically. Yeah.
Several of his works have been adapted into films, including The End of the Affair. So what about his storytelling? And I think you hinted at this earlier, Thomas. What about his storytelling translates so well to the screen?
Well, I think there are a lot of disappointing adaptations of Graham Greene, funnily enough. But I think it helped that quite early on in his career, he was the film critic for The Spectator, but he knew film producers. He hung around with them. Alexander Korda was a friend, and he bankrolled him in some respects as well. So he was in that world, and contacts is all in that world. So a lot of these things did get optioned pretty quickly and made. I mean, obviously the Third Man is a masterpiece. I would say that Michael Caine in The Quiet American is also well worth checking out, and The End of the Affair is also superb. But there's ones that sort of, I don't know, leave me a little bit flatter. Although I quite like The Human Factor as well, which was made, I think, late 70s, early 80s, which has, I think, David Bowie's wife Iman in. So it always attracted great cast and actors as well. So we have the comedians with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, and Alec Guinness. So what a stellar cast that was. And I think maybe James Earl Jones. I could be wrong about that. But that film isn't as good considering the cast it's got. Again, a fine book. I think there was the honorary Consol film with Michael Caine and Richard Gere, and I would argue read the book rather than see the film on that one.
Always.
So yeah, there's hit and misses. I mean, obviously Brighton Rock was a huge hit at the time, and I do think that somehow Greene attracted great actors. Obviously, we have Alec Guinness in Our Man in Havana as well, who is just perfect casting. But I think there are a few which are sort of more missteps potentially. Saying this, these are all good, very good films. Yeah, but the books are better. Listeners, the books are
always
better.
Yeah, there's just so much more content in the book, and I've said it before that when you read, you are a co-creator because your imagination is part of the whole reading of fiction, particularly literary fiction. What do you consider to be Graham Greene's best novel, or your favorite? Maybe it's too much to say. Well, this
So
one's the
yes,
best.
no, I thought you may ask this, and while I was walking my dogs, and so I actually sort of mentioned sort of the top five in this novel, Eastern Approaches, which I wrote, and I'm gonna sort of reel them off or try to. So we have, I mean, these are the books as well which I reread, and it's quite we all kind of are quite time precious and we all read a lot, but I think it's a testament to them when we reread the books
Hmm.
and revisit them. So I mean, I must have read A Quiet American about five times. The End of the Affair I've read a few times. The Heart of the Matter, I'm quite partial as well to The Human Factor, which is a great kind of undervalued spy novel, really. And apart from him killing the dog in it, which annoys me, I love that. I love that book. That's one I would return to as well. And it's one again. There's a very dark, dry humor in it as well, which Green should be credited for. He has a very sly sense of humor. So although there are themes of death and suicide and depression, there is humor in a lot of these books, which people can and should enjoy. But if I was to recommend anyone to go out, I would probably say The Quiet American.
Good starting
As a
point for anybody who doesn't know Graham Greene.
exactly,
Start right there.
exactly. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So, what do you consider his, just final question on Graham Greene, what do you see as his place in literary history?
Well, I think he will continue to be read, despite him not being on school syllabuses, rather than because of it. I just think that in terms of the pleasure of reading and hanging around with some interesting characters, people will read and reread the best of Green's work. It has something to say about the world. The world will always be full of some nasty dictators, some idiot communists, some sort of depressed alcoholics, and it's not a bad kind of place to be in some ways. The Greenland, if you like, where it will teach you a little bit about the world and or Green's world. I just think that world will resonate.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, they are, they're entertaining, and I do think that more than most writers, he can teach you how to write. You read this stuff. You kind of read someone like William Boyd as well. If you are a novelist, these people, can teach you how to write and self-edit. Uh, so I think that lots of writers will always return to Graham Greene, as well as readers.
Why isn't
Yeah.
Graham Greene in class
I
syllabuses?
just think he will be considered too controversial, really. These books probably used to be on the syllabus, but I don't think they are now. John le Carre isn't on any, syllabus really, to my knowledge, and this guy again will engage students and get them to read more. So I just think that they should be. Yeah, I mean. I'm not sure. I
Yeah.
just, we could all argue that,
That's up to the professors, right? I mean, they make these decisions.
well, the kind of educationalist, yeah. I mean, you should be read at, what's the equivalent UK at A level.
Well,
I
they
mean, the
might say,
books
hey,
are,
after Shakespeare and Joyce
I know.
and Evelyn Waugh, there's no room for anybody else.
Well, yeah, I just think that what he will do is
What
get,
about Evelyn
you
Waugh? Evelyn, your name is Waugh. Your name is well,
yes.
you know.
So it's a nod towards Evelyn Waugh and Catholicism. Now, also in terms of the kind of, I mean, it's a very weak pun, but the hero, one of the heroes, protagonists is called James Marshall, who's an ex-soldier, and there's lots folding in about war where he was in Afghanistan. So that's kind of that's what's behind War. But there is, I mean, I'm a far greater fan of Graham Greene than Evelyn Waugh. I mean, they knew each other, and I mean, Evelyn Waugh was probably an even bigger and, in a sense, more authentic Catholic, but they were quite bitchy towards each other sometimes. I think Green and Waugh. But then again, writers are always kind of bitchy towards each other. I don't think that's any any
Yes.
big scoop.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So what about Thomas Waugh? You, in
Yep.
your beginnings, when did you know that you wanted to write?
Well, I mean, it was probably in my early 20s, and it was from reading a lot. I mean, I kind of, before I sort of encountered Graham Greene, I was kind of obsessed with Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and Chekhov. So I kind of wanted to write literary fiction. Then realized I've got to eat, and I'd like to order non-house wine every now and then. So I realized that I needed to write, a lot more commercially. So I thought to myself, okay, I do love the likes of Graham Greene, but I also appreciate, what the likes of Lee Child does as well. So I wanted to create a kind of hybrid of Jack Reacher and Graham Greene. And that's when I sort of wrote these first novellas, which are put together under Gun for Hire. And then I wrote kind of these spy thrillers, which are heavily influenced by Graham Greene. There's lots of nods towards that. Although one of the characters as well is called Daniel Ambler, which is a nod to Eric Ambler as well. So I am sort of standing on the shoulders of giants in that respect.
That's a good place to be. Yeah. Yeah.
And
So how many
these
novels have
people.
you written now between novels and
So
novellas? How
Thomas
many
Waugh
books?
has now written six novels, and then there's one book, A Gun for Hire, which is a collection of 3 novellas. So the latest one is Time to Kill, which is set in London, and it's a kind of revenge thriller where basically he goes around killing lots of drug dealers.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's very little Graham Greene like. I mean, it's not like Graham Greene like, really, to be honest. But it's quite violent. Which again, some of Graham Greene, there are these flashes of violence. There's, he's not afraid of spilling some blood, although he doesn't really do action scenes, funny enough. But so that's I've kind of completed this James Marshall trilogy, and there's a character in it called Daniel Ambler, who is a novelist, a spy novelist, and a spy. So I've also written 3 novels under him as the main protagonist, but they kind of make cameos in each other's books. I do prefer writing the spy novels, I must confess, and I'll that's what I'll do next. I'm just not quite sure what will happen. Yeah.
What is it about the spy novels that is it just more bracing
I
for
think,
you?
well, I mean, I've spoken to this about a few people and spy novelists and crime novelists. I mean, the great expert on the old spy novel is a chap called Paul Burke, who is bringing out the encyclopedia of spy novels next year. And he's also the editor of Aspects of Crime. And I think that spy novels are kind of posh crime novels. And largely because of John le Carré and Graham Greene, if you want to get snobby about it, it's the kind of the sort of superior crime novel is the spy novel. And it's just a little bit more literary, if you like. I mean, a lot of the ingredients are the same in crime fiction and spy fiction, but spies are just very interesting. There's this whole kind of subset audience for spy novels as well. And, there's lots of kind of in-jokes. And there's plenty going on in the world. I mean, basically, the Cold War, the old enemy of Russia, it's endlessly kind of fascinating, really.
Talk about your writing regimen. Are you a morning writer? Are you catch as catch can or evening writer?
So because I'm quite busy during the week, I tend to write on the weekends, although if I need to up my word count in the summer, once the sun comes up, I can write. and I'm a morning person really. Although I also can go on a train and sit in a bar and write notes in a pad as well, which I then write up on a weekend. I mean, everyone has their own formula. It's about kind of working out what works for you, and that kind of works for me, I guess. Yeah. I mean, often when I'm writing a spy novel, I will read the likes of Graham Greene and John le Carre again, and a few others as well, just to just immerse myself in that kind of world and atmosphere. There are some writers who kind of steer clear of reading kind of anything similar, but I tend to immerse myself in it. Yeah.
Was there a turning point in your career? Was there a time when you felt like there was a breakthrough, whether it was a great piece of advice you were given, or you just maybe put in enough hours that it's like, wow, this is starting to flow?
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, I've also have a career under another name as a historical novelist. So that certainly happened a good decade ago or so, where I wrote a best-selling book. And then there was that click moment then where I found my voice, for want of a more trite cliche. And it did come a bit easier. And by selling lots of books, I was inspired to write more and similar books, and I did, and those thankfully sold well. But then I was getting a little bit bored, and I needed to do something else. So one of the things I did do was create Thomas Waugh to write thrillers and spy novels. So my breakthrough came free Thomas Waugh. And the good thing about Thomas Waugh compared to writing historical fiction is there's not so much research. There's about a fifth of the research to do. Where if you're writing about the medieval world, ancient Rome, World War II, you've got to do a lot of research. Where writing about nowadays, although there's more humor probably to be had as well, that becomes easier. There's a certain relaxation of not having to read a 500-page book on medieval history to create one paragraph in a historical novel. And it's a lot more
What name do you write
pleasurable.
under? Your historical novels are written under what name?
Well, that's Richard Foreman.
Richard Foreman. Okay.
So that's yeah. And
how many of those have you produced?
Richard Foreman has written over 20 novels.
So you're very productive.
I try and write
closing in on 30
novels
novels
a year. I try and write 2 short novels a year, and sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. But I roundabout I get there.
Do you think that the novella is when you stop and consider the era we're living in, Thomas, and the social media era, the real slapdash video, short postings and all that,
spans.
do you think that, the shrinking attention span, do you think that the age of novellas has kind of arrived in a way it wasn't before?
Well, I mean, I have written novellas. But I write them as series. So in terms of being time precious, for instance, and you've got it's a volume business in many ways. It suits my sort of time to write sort of 40,000 word novellas and turn that into, in a sense, a series of books, which is also a long novel, than necessarily write longer novels. I mean, I've mixed it up, basically. It's about what the story requires. But I did start off writing kind of, and it's also, Kindle allows you to do this, of course, where you can write 20,000 words and publish. I mean, even I think that I blitzed so I kind of years ago, I wrote a series of extended short stories about Raffles, the kind of gentleman thief. So I wrote, I don't know, there must have been about 15,000 word stories and put them together as a novel. So there's practicalities on Kindle that has probably shifted the market and, given more sanction to write novellas, as well as the fact that people are supposedly time precious and short books are all the rage. It's a
Mm-hmm.
real mix, I think. I don't know. I've had this conversation a bit lately where because of young people, if you like, and attention spans, it's and the way that YouTube works, etc. Shorter is better, but I don't know. There's a sweet spot, I think, of writing 70,000 words or 90,000 words. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even Agatha Christie was knocking them out 50,000 words, and you really can tell a story in 50,000 words. I'm all for that. Yeah, and a
Is
lot of
there?
Graham Greene stuff is short, of course.
Yeah, yeah. He didn't write, War and Peace in terms of
I mean, I think his
pounds.
longest, yeah, it's probably 90,000 words was his longest novel, but there's plenty that would be about 70,000 words.
Hmm.
He wrote some novellas as well. I mean, the bomb party, and I mean, the end of the affair must only be 40, 50,000 words, I suspect.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah,
Wh-
that novel is gives you more than lots of other literary novelists will do in, three times the word length, if you like.
Yeah, you were saying, not a word or paragraph wasted. I mean, it was a
Yeah.
very disciplined and beautifully
Exactly. I
written
mean, F.
book.
Scott Fitzgerald kind of had that quality as well, I think. Maybe it's partly the training in journalism as well. I don't quite know, but there is the kind of elegance to what he does as well as sort of pace and color. I just think he can teach us all a few things. Saying that,
Yeah,
he did
yeah.
write some terrible books to begin with.
Well,
Yeah.
that was training, right? You have
Yeah,
to
it
do
was
your
true.
training.
I mean, well, this is what the novella can do as well as a practical guide. If you've got any young novelists, listen, write 40,000 words. It will, because that's still a commitment. The idea of just writing sort of poetry and short stories, again, that should be a grounding to get you to then, okay, I'm going to write a novella. Uh, and once you've done 40,000 words, and the good thing is that at the end of the day, you can publish 40,000 words on Kindle, or some other publishers may publish it. And then you get to, I've done 40,000 words. I can now do 60,000 words. And then, you've got a novel. Uh,
Yeah.
so
You
it
know,
is
that's
yeah,
That's one piece of advice you just gave. That's a good piece of advice right
yeah,
there for aspiring novelists.
yeah.
Is there another piece of advice you might offer if somebody was to come to you and
I
say, "I want to be
always
a novelist,"
say,
and I'm not
so
there
I've,
yet?
when I sort of give talks or people ask for my advice, I mean, one bit of advice I give, and the color drains from their face, is just to say, read Tolstoy. Read the best of the best. He will teach you things about writing as well. But read, I mean, this is it, they'll people like Graham Greene and Tolstoy will teach you to be a better novelist. They'll also teach you about the market. I mean, as I say, there's nothing wrong with reading, Lee Child, or certainly the first sort of Jack Reacher novels, because there's a reason why they sold in their millions. Because they've got something. They had an X factor, and you'll never be able to wholly recreate that X factor, but you should be looking at what these people do.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, for sure.
you know, yeah. So that
Which
would be
of
my
your
advice:
novels,
is read. Yeah.
which Richard Foreman or Thomas Waugh novel was
Uh,
magic for you? Magic in terms of it really either it came fully formed and was written very quickly, or just had
yeah.
the quality that you were
Mm.
aspiring to.
Well, it took me. There's a couple. So I wrote a heavily literary novel called Warsaw, set in the Warsaw Ghetto during World War II. Now, that took me years to write and research. But at the end of the day, a lot of people have read it and sort of said how good it is. I mean, I wouldn't want to spend that much time on a book now, to be honest. But I mean, eventually, that book was like kind of number one in Canada on Kindle for all of an afternoon, and went top 20 in the UK. I mean, it was when I wrote a book called Augustus, Son of Rome, which was a huge kind of bestseller and continued to sell. And that gave me the formula as well. That's if I just, it's like, okay, let's replicate that. and then I wrote quite a few kind of books set in ancient Rome. I mean, I'm quite fond of the kind of Daniel Ambler spy novels written by Thomas Waugh as well. I just really enjoyed writing those, and if you enjoy writing something, I think it does come through that the kind of readers enjoy it as well. So I've done a fair few things. I mean, it's quite nice I've done some fiction set in medieval times as well. So there was a book called Band of Brothers. That sold incredibly well, and sort of gave me the confidence okay, you can write in different periods as well. I mean, during COVID, I mean, I'm reasonably prolific anyway, but COVID gave me the time and space to sort of become more prolific.
Really dig
and I wrote, yeah. So I wrote a kind of series based on the First Crusade as well, and I enjoyed that as well. Partly because I got to research it quite a bit as well. So there's kind of some good history in that. So it's a real mix. Yeah.
Yeah. Just in closing, then let's talk about your bio and where you want it to be when you're done with your work. How do you want your bio to read when you're done with your work?
He spent all his money. No.
Well, I love George
Best.
I like George Best's, the famous British soccer player said, I spent 90% of my money on women and drinking. The other 10% I wasted.
Well, there was the thing where, he was in a hotel room once, and I think he was kind of in the bath with, I don't know, a former Miss World or whatever, or a couple of dolly birds, as we might call them. And then a journalist came in and asked him, where did it all go wrong? And he was sitting there, sandwiched between two women and drinking champagne. So in terms of,
what was his answer? His answer was the visual, right?
Well, I don't know how he answered, but basically the journalist asked, "Where did it all go wrong?" But he had a wonderful time. I did meet George Best a couple of occasions, funny enough.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did a book signing with him because many, many years ago, I worked in a bookshop and did book signings, and I did one with George Best. He was a lovely man. And then years later, I met him in a pub, which was a bit sadder because, I mean, I was there sort of a pretty young man. It was just before a wedding or whatever, and I was there with a friend of mine. And it was George Best. I mean, this guy is a legend, but he was sort of sitting there on his own, head over a sort of vodka and tonic or whatever, looking a bit lonely, basically. It was a bit, and I mean, that sort of brings me to what will happen to me at the end of my life, probably. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's, the good thing about writing is you'll be out. I mean, I know writers that are 80 plus and still going.
Yes.
And engaged and enjoying it. I think that I'll just never get bored with reading or writing. And as much as, crap that goes on in the world, that's not a terrible thing to kind of,
you think about somebody like an athlete and how short a career an athlete has,
exactly.
or
what
or technologists, they end up kind of falling behind on stuff. But when you're a novelist, when you're a writer, you can be in. Well, Philip Roth did some of his best novels were in his 80s.
Yeah,
he had that really productive
Greene had
period.
A great third act as well, really. So you can, I mean, it's also quite cheap to do. I mean, it's both a hobby and a profession. So, in the sort of twilight years, it will continue to be so as well. There's always, I always tell myself I'm going to give myself a break from writing, but then a week later, just an idea will pop into my head, and I'll probably start writing, another book. It's, I mean, it's quite lucky like that. I mean, I don't really believe in writer's block, to be honest, not with my sort of desire to have more non-house wine. I always get inspired to keep writing. But it's that's a nice place to be. I do feel lucky and grateful in that regard. I mean, the other piece of advice is to writers is keep writing, get it done as well as get it right. You've got to keep on keeping on.
Yeah, it's an act of faith. It really is an act
yeah,
of faith.
I mean,
It
years
comes
ago as
to you if you
well.
keep at it. It
Yeah.
comes to you.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. It does get easier. The harder you practice, the luckier you get. I mean, I would say as well, years ago when I sort of started writing, and this is probably the same for lots of people, pardon me, you do start off starting lots of works and you never finish them.
Yes.
But ultimately, I will not start a novel now that I won't finish. I mean, that's it. You've got to be, put it through some stress test your idea. But yeah, once you start, I'll get it done. I mean, I write lots of series as well, so it's about committing to say 3 books. But it just it gets done. Yeah, by hook or by crook.
Thomas, thank you for coming on the program. Really appreciate your time and your insights.
Oh, that's my pleasure. No, it was fun. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a gloomy afternoon here in London, but this has been a highlight. Thank you.